Hello guys, welcome to Atlet Lessons. Today we shall have a look at new video lesson. Learning a language is like learning the most important aspect of a nation. English is in fact a language which has crossed its national boundary for a long time now. English is spoken in almost all the countries of the world as an international language, and that's the reason why we call it the lingua franca. As a result, this language has many varieties now. Among these varieties, the standard form of English still is regarded as the most prestigious and accepted form of English. As we all know that linguistics is a scientific study of the language and its structure, including the study of grammar, syntax, phonetics, etc. Now, when linguistics began to develop in the early decades of the 20th century, we have seen a lot of video lessons. You have attended a lot of lessons on linguistics, how linguistics is a scientific knowledge, a scientific approach to learning the structure of a language. So when linguistics began to develop in the early decades of the 20th century, there was a natural and reasonable reaction against much of the traditional study. When advancement and new concepts and ideas are developed, of course, we turn back and have a scrutinized look at how the traditional was, how the classical style was, what was the old style, how it looked like, and what are the fallacies or the flaws and complaints or the errors, or what were the weaknesses and the flaws of the traditional study. Hence, what happened was that the traditional grammar came to be scrutinized. Before that, we shall have a look at what grammar is. Every language has its own rules, theories, and principles that a language speaker and the natives of a language community are supposed to follow. Okay, every domain of knowledge has got its own rules, theories, and foundational principles which we are supposed to follow for a proper, relevant usage of that particular knowledge branch of study. Now, what is grammar? Grammar is the structural foundation of our ability to express ourselves. Learning a language means it's a different experience. It's a unique and fantastic experience when you learn a new language which is foreign to you, because you are not a native to that language. You are learning another language other than your native tongue. And it has got a different structure. It has got a different tone, pronunciation, theories, rules, usages, contextual differences, etc. So here, grammar is the structural foundation. It is the foundation, it's the base on which how we are able to use it to express ourselves, because using language and communicating means you're expressing yourself, your identity, your personality, your dispositions, and everything, whatnot. Okay. Dictionary defines grammar as rules by which words change their forms and are combined in other senses. English grammar is a body of rules that describe the structure of expressions in the English language. Like, this is similar as in the case of any other language, of course. And as you all are adept and skilled now, and you are proficient in the scientific study of language, the various branches of linguistics, you know what semiotics is, what semiology is, and various other foundational key concepts and key ideas and strategies and techniques and different approaches, which is inclusive of linguistics. There were huge, massive domain of linguistics, of course. So grammar is one particular branch of this study of language, and it describes how the structure of expressions, how words are used, how words are formed. I mean, how phrases are formed from words, how clauses are formed, and how sentences are formed. So you understand that its focus, the trajectory of study is towards the syntax. Syntax, of course, we know it's a grammar or the rules or theories behind sentence formation, sentence usage, and sentence construction. Traditional grammar, as we have told, it is came to be scrutinized. Okay, when linguistics was developing and progressing. So, traditional grammar, in fact, it was actually based on the European languages. Of course, you know that English is a conglomeration. It's a matrix. It's a hub of different languages. You have so many other languages on which English is highly indebted to different languages, different foreign languages like Latin, Greek, Scandinavian, Anglo-Saxon, Indian, Persian, etc. and whatnot. It's the widespread and elaborate grammar that so when you're depending on other or when you're highly indebted to other languages, it's quite natural that the grammars of all these languages will be directly or indirectly impacting English language. And this is widely used in language teaching, and this is often termed as pedagogic grammar. Traditional grammar refers to the type of grammar study which is done prior to the beginning of modern linguistics. And grammar, in this traditional sense, is the study of structure and formation of words and sentences, how you combine words, how they form phrases, and how they form sentences without much reference to sound and meaning. If the attention is towards sound and meaning of words, of course it belong to phonetics and phonology. So they were well established grammatical descriptions of these languages, and it seemed very appropriate, very pertinent to adopt the existing categories from these descriptions and apply them in the analysis of newer languages as English, because most of the studies and analysis were conducted in the classical languages like Latin, Italian, Greek, etc. So now, in analyzing, in observing newer languages like English, of course, English does not have much, English is not too old like that of Latin and Greek. So again, I have shared multiple slides on different versions for defining traditional grammar. And traditional grammar, of course, it can be traced back over 2,000 years, and it includes grammars from the classical period of Greek, India, Rome, Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the 18th and the 19th century, and more modern times. So the grammars created in this tradition, they reflect the prescriptive view. Of course, there are two huge and wide branches to describe this analysis or study of traditional grammar. Of course, one is the prescriptive and the other is the descriptive. Of course, prescriptive is pre-scientific and descriptive is scientific. And what do you call so? Prescriptive means you're prescribing or suggesting or insisting to abide or oblige, to adhere to or stick on to the rules and theories and principles underlying the usage of language. And that is why it's often termed as pre-scientific. The other one is, of course, descriptive. And why descriptive? The language rules and theories and grammatical rules and guidelines and instructions are derived or deduced from how the natives of a language community, they use the language. And that is the reason why it is called scientific, because it's empirical, analytical, and objective in style. You have more important details and information related to traditional grammar. Of course, it is found in the pre-linguistic era of grammatical study, because these days you don't have a traditional grammar. You have what you call as modern grammar, but in fact, it is not hailed as, it's not declared, or often it's not called or referred to as modern grammar, but rather it's called modern linguistics or structural linguistics. You don't have anything called modern grammar, but for the sake of understanding and comprehension, we use the word. You distinguish between traditional grammar and modern grammar. We don't use modern grammar. Instead, we often refer to it as modern linguistics. So here you can see traditional grammarians consider Latin as their model. Of course, English language is highly indebted to, has borrowed a lot of words, vocab, grammatical rules, usages, tone, pronunciation, so many aspects of the language behavior has been incorporated into English language. As a reason, Latin was considered their exemplary. Latin was considered as their model because English is a part of the Indo-European family of languages. You all know that, and to which Latin and Greek also belongs. So to learn, analyze, and dismantle, or to have an objective observation, whatever kind of observation and a very closer look at English language means, of course, you have to take into consideration Greek and Latin, of course. It did have similar grammatical elements. That's the reason the theoreticians and grammarians, they discerned so many grammatical elements which are similar to among all these languages like Roman, Italian, Scandinavian, Greek, Latin, etc., with that of English. So if you study the form of traditional grammar, the rules of classical languages were followed, considering that English did not have its own grammar and English followed Latin grammar. So this is one of the most important flaw or error that the grammarians conducted, or they committed such a crime, such a mistake, that English, they try to prove that English did not have a grammar of its own because it was indebted, or it's really relied a lot on Latin and Greek. Of course, Latin can be taken as a center for around which even English grammar, another language like English, revolves around. Without the parts of speech, traditional grammatical analysis also make use of numerous other categories, because English grammar relies upon the Latin in the case of number, gender, case, person, tense, voice. All of these, they relied more. It was not relevant, They relied more on Latin and Greek. Again, you have more and more rules and definitions for traditional grammar here. So it's a type of language study that existed before the beginnings of modern linguistics. And of course, it's a collection of prescriptive rules and concepts about the structure of language. And one thing you need to keep in mind is that traditional grammar is always prescriptive, whereas modern linguistics is descriptive. We shall have a look at those slides which differentiate and distinguish very in subtle terms these two. And traditional grammarians, they considered written form also as the most important aspect of language rather than the speech. So they considered the written form, the graphic element, the grapheme or the graphic script was considered. It was a writing-oriented kind of prescription. And since they were based on the principles of Latin grammar, not on current linguistic research in English. In linguistics, of course, they describe the structure. It's a framework for the description of structure. Traditional grammars, they are used in language education, only in colloquial, normal, transactional. Even now, you can see when I instruct you, when I teach you, or when didactic action is taking place and you're attending to the lessons and classes, intellectual academic sessions are going on, we abide to the traditional norms and conventions. Even now, this can be seen, this kind of a usage of grammar and sticking on to traditional rules is observable in classrooms and classroom learning, educational institutions. But in our normal talk, in our daily transactions and conversation, in popular culture, you wouldn't find anyone sticking on or adhering to grammatical rules and prescriptive theories. You have several advantages of traditional grammar, there are, of course, there are two sides to a coin, of course. Likewise, traditional grammar has its own advantages and disadvantages. So I am not talking much on modern grammar because, of course, you know a lot about modern grammar and linguistics, how far it is developed and how far it has progressed. You know more about modern grammar, modern linguistics. So I am not intending to speak volumes and volumes on modern grammar or linguistics because we are already done with that. The primary purpose of a speaking and writing is to communicate with others, and grammar is simply the common accepted methods of organizing its rules, how you combine, how you organize and express words and phrases to that the intended meaning. When you speak, the listener should understand. He need to know what message or information or details you're trying to convey to him. So, if the listener understands you properly, that means the communication is effective. Otherwise, you're grammatical. Every time we don't bother about this grammar, we don't take into consideration the syntactical rules or such in our daily conversation, connected speech. However, when the grammar rules they are not followed fair closely, it can become awkward for the listener to hear the intended message. Nobody has forced you, or no rules have been imposed recently or very lately, because today it's the era of modern linguistics, and of course we have descriptive grammar rather than prescriptive grammar. From the term prescriptive and descriptive, you understand one is very rigid and a closed system, whereas the other is open to changes and accepts any kind of changes, any kind of convincing and proper, reasonable changes in the system of language, because language matters where users or speakers of languages there they decide what languages. It's not the grammarians and phoneticians and theoreticians who prescribe rules and actually force the users, the language community natives to follow it at any cost. So, but then to a certain extent, you are supposed to follow the grammatical rules, not that rigid. It is as if they are having to walk through a verbal obstacle because to reach the destination. The meaning of the communication must be coherent and lucid to between the speaker and the listener. If you misuse grammar, it can convey to the reader or listener that the communicator is not educated or intelligent. So you needn't fully adhere to grammatical rules while you speak, but then to a fair amount, you are supposed to oblige to the grammatical rules. Improper use of grammar is used by writers when they are attempting to show a lack of refinement in their characters. So likewise, traditional grammar has got its own disadvantages. I'm not speaking much on the disadvantages because we have an upcoming video lesson on the fallacies or the flaws or the problems and issues in traditional grammar. So we shall have an exclusive session for discussing the fallacies and the flaws, the demerits, or what you say, the technical errors or flaws and failures and weaknesses underlying traditional grammar. Of course, you can have a reader. You can just read through these points, or this slide is left to you, open for you to read. We'll have an exclusive session on the fallacies of traditional grammar very soon. Yes, so here, modern grammar, of course, it focuses on the language students use. The students basically means the users, the natives of a language community. It's a way a native language or dialect is actually applied, how it is put to use, how they use the language. And from that, theories and principles and rules are derived. But traditional grammar, it focuses on identifying and labeling parts of a sentence for students to see the correct prescription for standard English sentences. Now we shall move on to what you call as descriptive and prescriptive. Linguists believe that the rules of traditional grammar they are inadequate because many of the rules are oversimplified, inconsistent, they are not consistently conformed to. So the the linguists, along with the faculties or teachers, of course, they study language with a descriptive approach that includes the analysis of real samples of a mixture of English dialect. Linguists or teachers using a descriptive approach, they say that when you follow a descriptive approach, it helps the students, or it allows or permits the language users or speakers to investigate language on a deeper level. And this enables the students to see the system at work. They see the endless, newer and fresher insights and depths of a language. Instead of teaching them isolated, frozen, feelingless, prescriptive rules based on Latin, it's a dead language, of course. It is no longer in flux as English constantly is. Latin, of course, is a highly revered kind of language. It's a old classical language in which so many great works have been written. The religious scriptures are written, and it's a highly revered language. But then it is a dead language today. So, following grammar of a dead language, which is no more in flux, which is no more in use, it's quite awkward and inadequate as far as English language is concerned. So, modern linguists, they changed, they shifted from adhering or sticking on, or what do you say, very strictly following the traditional grammarian concepts and prescriptive rules, and they shifted on, they drifted on gradually and conveniently to what is today called as modern linguistics. So, descriptive and prescriptive grammars, what are the differences between this and how are they defined and distinguished? Descriptive grammar it's actually focuses on describing the manner how either native or non-native speakers use the language on a daily basis. So it includes a set of rules about how language based on how it is actually used. Use the language, put it into practice, make it a fact, make it a happening, and then derive or deduce rules. But traditional grammars, they told the people how to use. It's strict rules, prescribing, insisting, suggesting, and forcing. So, traditional grammars, they try to lay down the rules. You don't like it, actually. Well, nobody likes it when rules are imposed upon you. They are often called a prescriptive kind of grammar. Yes. You have a wonderful chart here where traditional grammar and modern linguistics is differentiated. You can see them parted into two categories, the definition of traditional grammar and the definition of modern linguistics, and how they are prescriptive. One is traditional grammar is prescriptive and the other one is descriptive, of course, and the origin. Traditional grammar, it's traced back to 15th century, but then modern linguistics is very recent. Of course, we know the linguists and the structural linguists like Thrissur and what do you say, Charles Sanders Peirce, Noam Chomsky, Bloomfield, etc. And traditional grammar focuses on written form, whereas modern linguistics or modern grammar is based basically on speech. Yes. And the standards. Standards are the principles underlying traditional grammars, of course, the Latin-based framework, whereas modern linguistics does not prescribe or adhere to any particular framework of any other language, but it every day, every now and then, it scientifically approaches language and it pays attention or focus on how the language users, the speakers of the language community use language, how they practice language, how it really happens in reality. Yes, a prescriptive grammar, it specifies what is right and what is wrong. They are always caught hold of they are trapped in the stranglehold, or they are trapped in the what do you say, the cliche of defining what is right and what is wrong. They always bother about that. But a descriptive grammarian, he tries to avoid all such cliches and such stereotypical analysis and judgments about correctness, and concentrates on describing and explaining the way the people use our language. That we know that in our daily life too, in our daily transactions too. When you talk, when you write your exams, when you prepare your seminars, and when you talk, when you address a formal crowd formally, You are very conscious about sticking on to rules. You try hard to not to make any grammatical errors or syntactical errors. You're very much conscious. You're alert so that no slip of tongue takes place, or you are really scared. You have your own anxiety within you because you cannot tolerate to commit, or you cannot tolerate any grammatical errors or flaws, which is really disgraceful. But when you talk to your friends, when you talk to your family, of course, you don't bother at all. So that's how language is being used. And every now and then, language is becoming, it's evolving, it's fluid, it's flux, and it's subjected to change. And a very good language, a perfect exemplary language, is one that accepts or welcomes a reasonable and convincing changes. As David Crystal, very recently, he spoke at a webinar. He says that very recently, very shortly, or these days, you have the future of English language, the formation of the language. He said that we'll have a plurality of Englishes. You can't say that the American accent or the British accent is the perfect, which is right or wrong. Nobody bothers about that. Nobody cares about that. What matters is what I speak should be legible to you. It should be comprehensible to you. It should be lucid, and it should make some sense. It shouldn't be awkward, and the listener should understand. And then proper communication takes place means it is proper English, and that's the reason why you can expect or anticipate a plurality, a bunch of a very huge bunch of Englishes, which is developing and is upcoming very soon. Again, you have more definitions on descriptive and prescriptive grammar. You can choose which definitions you are comfortable with, and you have certain examples to show which is right, which is wrong, because sometimes they use of they instead of one or you. For example, for whom are you calling? Who are you calling for? So this is the difference between prescriptive grammar. Sometimes you say that he and me, we were. No, you shouldn't say that. He and I. This is the proper. Today, of course, you can accept when you say he and me, myself. That's not proper. You will say, a prescriptive grammarian, he will try to find out or try to pick out the errors, and he notices a lot of issues in that. You shouldn't say that he and I should do that. So that's the way of the statement, that structure how it goes. And that's the difference between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. Again, you have more slides on these. Rules, descriptive or modern grammar. They deals with the rules that govern what people do, or they can say what a language affords or permits its users. Language provides or furnishes the luxury of a usage, the freedom to use language to its users, and they are quite natural, non-intuitively, and they need not be taught. Language is not something to be taught, but then we are learning language and linguistics, of course. Paradoxical, in fact, an objective, non-judgmental description of grammatical constructions in a language. But then you have prescriptive rules or traditional grammar. They govern what people, that is it, there lies the point, what people should or shouldn't say. They are always bothered or concerned with the do's and do nots underlying a language, and they are not natural at all. They must be learned, taught in school, and they often reflect value judgments. If you write proper grammar, you will be awarded with marks. You secure good marks. If you have grammatical errors, of course, you lose marks. And prescriptive grammar refers to the structure of a language as certain people think it should be. Again, you have, I'm sharing more and more slides so that you can choose. You are also given permission to choose your own convenient kind of definitions. You can scribble and take down notes, of course, and go through them, where descriptive grammar It's an approach which is concerned with describing the use of language by native or non-native speakers. Of course, we all belong to the community of language of non-native speakers. And descriptive grammar, it tells you, it explains or it elucidates that language usage can vary according to varied speakers. So you cannot say which is correct, which is not correct. What I speak and you speak is correct, relevant, and proper. So far, our conversation is meaningful and effective. What I say, if you're able to grasp and understand, of course, it's a proper, effective communication. You cannot say that I'm wrong or you are wrong, you've gone wrong. Rules are made according to the daily usage of the language by speakers. Of course, recently the current pandemics has impacted language, massive way, in an amazing way. So many words came in, landed, arrived, so many words were added, and so many words were lost, and new coinages, new phrases, new kind of a talking style, everything has been developed. And of course, within a few years, a sack full of words will, of course, join the dictionaries and our lexicons and our daily mouth service or lip service, as you call. Prescriptive, of course, it's concerned with establishing the norms, insisting upon rules, and it takes the principle that long existed grammar rules created by the native speakers, of course, English, belong to the British. And if you want to speak proper English, if you could claim that you are an educated person or you are able to speak in English, if you are able to converse in English, that means you are supposed to follow all the strict rules prescribed by the traditional grammarians of the native speakers that they have chosen, or they have given you options of correctness and incorrectness. And they are specified in standard sets of grammar rules which you are supposed to follow. Yes, again, more and more definitions for prescriptive and descriptive grammar. Towards the bottom of the slide, you can see an example. I don't know who to see. I don't know who to see. So there lies the difference between prescriptive and descriptive. The prescriptive, they are very rigid, very strict, very austere in using language. But whereas descriptive grammar, they welcome all changes. So far, the speakers, the users of language, are comfortable with that. So here we have seen what grammar is all about and how traditional grammar has been scrutinized and how far modern linguistics has advanced, and what you mean by the traditional grammar and modern grammar, and the distinction between prescriptive and descriptive kind of grammars. So we shall have a closer look at the fallacies and the errors and the faults, the errors, the mistakes, the complaints a language community usually points out. The grammarians and theoreticians, they often points out and notices 10 types of fallacies in traditional grammar, of course. This happened when modern linguistics or modern grammar gained momentum in the contemporary period. So we shall have a closer look at that exclusive session for the fallacies of traditional grammar. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you guys in the next video lesson.